the imperialists have sacrificed the American people for their death cult. Thousands of young American men and women have died for so-called freedom in Iraq and Afghanistan. But where is that freedom they're talking about? Is it the freedom to come back from a horrible war with PTSD and to be greeted with indifference by the government? Is it the freedom to be unemployed? Is it the freedom to let yourself die because you can't afford health care? Is it the freedom to live on the street in the richest country in the world? Is it the freedom to be a tweaking drug addict? Is it the freedom for little girls from dirt poor families to sell their bodies to vile predators because they're too poor and too traumatized to do anything else? A system that breeds such misery has no right to call itself democratic. It has no right to pretend to be free. While there is still one man who fears for his housing, for his employment, for his health care, freedom is a meaningless word. The freedom to live a decent life, to pursue happiness, in the words of Jefferson, can only be obtained when every man and woman in this country and all over the world, NATO, the guard dog of the Yankee and European ruling class, is going to do everything in its power to keep that from happening. They will bomb, destroy, execute any country or anyone who stands in the way of imperialist expansion, which is dearly needed by the ruling class to keep this system going. And they will send your children as cannon fodder to do the dirty work and to die away from their homeland, from their family, for the interest of a privileged few. They will tell you the enemy is in Russia. They will tell you the enemy is in China. They will tell you the enemy is in North Korea. Does Russia have military bases all around the USA? Is China bombing away an entire people in Palestine? Has North Korea ever invaded or attacked any country? The ruling class is lying to you. They're maintaining you in a false solidarity with them, talking about defending freedom while stealing it from you, along with your billions of tax dollars to fund Ukrainian neo-Nazis and the genocide of Palestinian civilians. They don't want you to unite with the common man of the rest of the world. They don't want you to realize that you and he have the same interest, to be at peace, to collaborate. They want you to hate the Russian men. They want you to hate the Chinese men. They want you to hate the Korean men. They spread their lies about these peoples, the peoples of the world, to keep you ignorant. Their bogus nationalism, which is a thin veil hiding globalist imperialism, stands in the way of true patriotism and internationalism. It stands in the way of the liberation of the American working class. It stands in the way of the liberation of humanity itself. We don't want Americans dying at wars or from drug overdose on the street. We don't want them to live in the constant anxiety that everything around them can fall to pieces in the bat of an eye. We don't want the Palestinians to die under American-made bombs and bullets. We don't want South Americans to be spoiled from their rich natural resources and live in poverty. We don't want the Koreans to be artificially separated by U.S. military occupation in the South. We want freedom for America. We want freedom for Palestine. We want freedom for Korea. We want freedom from Donbass. We want freedom for humanity. Down with NATO!
Down with NATO!
Down with NATO!
Down with NATO!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
NATO imperialist cooperation. The NATO imperialist alliance to be defeated and rebuild the worldwide axis of resistance. Recognizing that the ultimate cause of all the world currently raging around the globe is imperialist monopoly capitalism. Global economic system of domination and exploitation, we, the parties and organizations of the World Anti-Imperialist Platform, note the following. That the war in Ukraine has also exposed the military weaknesses of the imperialist countries, which have for so long held out the threat of overwhelming force to compel the submission of those in the oppressed and developing world. And Ukraine today, despite NATO having spent a decade creating huge and multiple lines of fortification in preparation for a confrontation with Russia, and despite having built up the Ukrainian army into what was essentially NATO's largest fighting force, the Western alliance is being decisively beaten. That the war in Palestine
has further exposed its weakness. Despite its backing by NATO bombers and aircraft carriers, despite being re-equipped daily with arms supplies from the West, the Zionists are being decisively beaten on every front of the war. In Gaza by the Palestinian resistance, in northern Palestine and the Golan Heights by Hezbollah, and the Red Sea by Ansar Allah, and across occupied Palestine by a combination of regional resistance forces, including those based in heroic Yemen and occupied Iraq. That despite all their differences in ideology and outlook, the anti-imperialist camp today is stronger than it has been since the death of Joseph Stalin in 1953. In economic and technical terms, it is stronger than it has ever been, while imperialism is weaker than it has ever been. Truly, the balance of forces are reaching a decisive tipping point in history. That the wars in Ukraine and Palestine have also exposed the bankrupt and rotten state of much of what still calls itself the communist world. The war has provided us with the perfect litmus with which to find out who is a genuine revolution and who has become merely a tame opportunist, who retains fidelity to anti-imperialism in practice, and who merely hides behind plausible phrases as a cover for their rotten opportunist actions in support of imperialism. That the failure in its wars in Europe and West Asia will not hold the imperialists back from their war drive, but rather impel them on, desperate to save themselves and their system by any means necessary. It is in this light that we must understand the spread of NATO across the globe, the attempt to create the East Asian wing of NATO with which to confront China and the DPRK, and the building up of proxy armies by NATO on the continent of Latin America. We therefore commit to the following: that we will do everything in our power to help workers and oppressed peoples understand that we have a side in this war. That it is in every working person's interest for Russia to defeat NATO, and for Palestine and the wider Middle Eastern resistance to defeat Zionism and kick imperialism out of the Middle East. That these huge blows at our common enemy can only help accelerate the shifting of class forces in the world and create better conditions for the struggle against imperialist domination and exploitation everywhere else. That we will do everything in our power to bring to the attention of the masses the essential inability of the imperialist system to live in peace, highlighting the rapid and aggressive expansion of NATO across the world, in particular into East Asia and Latin America. And explaining that the imperialists hope to recover from their economic crisis through means of warfare and are desperately searching for fresh troops to throw into the battlefield. That we will work to spread awareness of the historical opportunity that is opening up to humanity, and the duty we have of rising to the times. That we will inject the working masses with optimism about their prospects for success and the bright future awaiting them on the other side of victory. Imperialism is in a deep crisis, and its combined forces are weaker than at any time in their history. Meanwhile, the combined forces of anti-imperialist resistance are stronger than they have ever been. People everywhere are crying out for the chance to break the chains of imperialist enslavement, impoverishment, and perpetual war. That they are crying out for the chance to develop along a human-centered and ultimately socialist path, free from exploitation of all times. The times are changing. All over the world, the balance of forces is shifting and a revolutionary current is building. Now is the time to redouble our efforts and building up the axis of resistance in every corner of the earth. Disband NATO, death to imperialism, no cooperation with imperialist war, victory to the resistance. Disband NATO, which is fixated on the pacifization of NATO. The NATO Summit is blatantly exposing its aggressive nature as a stage for plotting world war. The U.S. President Biden at NATO's 75th anniversary event revealed the maneuvers of imperialist forces aiming to prolong the war in Ukraine by mentioning that the U.S. and some NATO members will provide Ukraine with equipment for additional strategic air defense systems. NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg stated that if Russia wins in Ukraine, quote, this will embolden authoritarian leaders in Iran, North Korea, and China, end quote, forcibly linking the Ukraine war in Eastern Europe to anti-imperialist countries in Asia. These reckless, warmongering remarks are aimed at justifying the pretext for the pacifization of NATO. This is confirmed through the U.S. National Security Advisor Sullivan's thoughtless speech at the Defense Industry Forum hosted by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce alongside the summit. He said, quote, what happens in Europe impacts the Indo-Pacific. What happens in the Indo-Pacific impacts Europe, end quote. The ROK President, Yoon Suk-yeol, is actively colluding in the pacifization of NATO. He parroted aggressive and reckless statements from the U.S. and NATO intending to expand World War III to East Asia during the meeting with compatriots in Honolulu, Hawaii. He mentioned the Ukraine war and relations between DPRK and Russia, stating, carrying out a responsible role by cooperating with NATO members and partner countries in the Indo-Pacific region, end quote. And emphasizing the era where Atlantic and Indo-Pacific security are inseparable at the meeting with compatriots in Honolulu, Hawaii on July 8th. On the same day, he visited the Indo-Pacific Commander Samuel Paparo reaffirmed the imperialist stance by saying that Ukraine's security and Indo-Pacific security are interconnected. At this meeting, he stressed that the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command supports ROK U.S. combined combat readiness and plays a central role in providing U.S. augmentation in case of contingencies on the Korean Peninsula, exposing both humiliating dependency on the U.S. and provocative pro-U.S. stance simultaneously. Pacifization of NATO, quote, and the war exercises in the Pacific are being conducted simultaneously. From June the 28th to August 2nd, RIMPAC, the largest multinational joint military exercise, mobilizing over 25,000 troops and weapons, including strategic assets from 29 countries, is underway on the stage of the Pacific Rim. This includes pro-U.S. countries in East Asia, such as the ROK, Japan, and the Philippines, as well as 9 NATO member countries, including Britain, France, and Germany. NATO's war planning in Washington and developing war exercise in the Pacific Rim represents an expression of imperialist, aggressive maneuvers aimed at expanding the flames of World War III to the Pacific, mainly targeting the DPRK and China, and extending to East Asia by all means possible. As NATO's eastward expansion intensified the conflict in Ukraine into full-scale war, the pacifization of NATO will decisively provoke wars in East Asia, ushering in the full escalation of World War III and the full implementation of the new Cold War framework. The unity and struggle of the world anti-imperialist forces are just and inevitable. Progressive humanity worldwide will disband NATO through the world anti-imperialist joint struggle, crush imperialist aggressive maneuvers, and bring forward global independence and peace. July 10th, 2024, in front of the White House, Washington, D.C., spokesperson office of the People's Democracy Party, PDP.
On March 31, Kim Byung-do, chairman of the Gyeonggi branch of the People's Democratic Party, was arrested. And because of the Korean alliance cases, which fabricated during the Park Geun-hye fascist regime. The Korean alliance case was a public security case in which the Park Geun-hye regime government viciously suppressed the Korean alliance members who fight for independence, reunification, and democracy. The members of the Korean alliance were arrested by violating the National Security Act, the Korean alliance intelligence by the National Security Act. It shows South Korea looks fancy, but in real, it's fascism. The National Security Act is a fascist evil law. It is a law that stands in the way of Korean reunification and democracy in the South. The National Security Act suppresses freedom of thoughts and expressions. Many South Koreans of conscience and those fighting for reunifications have been killed because of the National Security Act. The National Security Act was created by the United States in 1948 and is the successor to the Public Security Act, which was created during Japanese imperialism's colonizations. The National Security Act is still uses to imprison activities in Korea. To realize the reunification of Korea and realize true democracy in South Korea, we aim to repeal this law and remove the U.S. troops for the regulations and reunification of Korea. Who against the people's interest is not Kim Byung-do, but Yoon Suk-yeol. Yoon Suk-yeol is making people's life hell through corruptions. It shows the President of the Republic of Korea, Yoon Suk-yeol, is nothing more than fascist puppet, totally controlled by the USA. He is a pro-America, pro-Japanese, and pro-NATO. He is trying to provoke a war in Korea. He is trying to form the Asian NATO. We shoot down with him for peace and independence. Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
World Anti-Imperialist Joint Struggle centered Washington, D.C. Let us bring an end to imperialism with the global anti-imperialist struggle and achieve independence and peace. NATO Summit will be held in Washington, D.C. from July 9th to 11th. The main agendas will be the war in Ukraine, deterrence and defense of NATO, and intensifying cooperation between AP4 Asian Pacific partners countries, which include Japan, the Republic of Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. The U.S. State Department, addressing the agenda on the war in Ukraine, blatantly expressed its plot to prolong the war by saying, Ukraine should be in a position to continue this fight into 2025. Meanwhile, the Biden administration mobilized all U.S. allies in West Asia, Middle East, including not only Israel, but also Egypt, Jordan, Qatar, Tunisia, and the United Arab Emirates for this meeting. Experts have mentioned that creating a Middle East version of NATO has been a long-held ambition of successive U.S. administrations. A series of facts demonstrates that this NATO summit is a plotting meeting for World War III. NATO is expanding its reach to the Indo-Pacific region. The NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg quoted specifically regarding China-Russia cooperation, stating China is inciting the largest military conflict in Europe since World War II. And regarding NATO AP4 coalition, he said, "Our security is not regional, it is global." The US State Department recklessly remarked that both Japan and ROK have the US state have been very good partners in addressing the threat posed by Russia, and that the security concerns faced in the Indo-Pacific are very similar to those that are faced in NATO's Article 5 territory. The USA, Japan, and the ROK agreed on the content corresponding to the Article 5 of the NATO Treaty's concept of collective security at the Camp David Summit in August 2023, and decided to conduct regular multi-domain joint military exercises, which are similar to NATO military exercises. As NATO's expansion to the east provoked the Ukraine war, the Indo-Pacificization of NATO is causing the opening of the war in East Asia. The war is imminent in East Asia, and the fronts are expanding in both Eastern Europe and West Asia. The US imperialist aggressive forces are utilizing pro-US Europe and Asia, pro-US fascist power in the ROK as their proxy for the war in the ROK, and conducting war exercises against the PRK day after day, while manipulating pro-US mongering forces in the Philippines and separatist forces in Taiwan to carry out aggressive military exercises against China, and moving Japanese militarism forces as a strike group for the war in East Asia. From January to May, the USA and NATO conducted large-scale invasion exercises near Russia, and recently allowed their homeland-supplied weapons to strike Russia. The Ukrainian neo-Nazi military fired US-made ATACMS missiles with prohibited cluster bombs at Sevastopol and massacred civilians, instigating the war in Eastern Europe. Zionist Israeli, which slaughtered over 40,000 Palestinians, is fanatically expanding the war in West Asia by bombing the Iranian consulate in Syria in April and precipitating an all-out war in Hezbollah of Lebanon in June. We must crush the imperialist aggressive war drive with the worldwide anti-imperialist joint struggle. As an anti-imperialist camp and imperialist camp clash, the truth and justice become clearer whose side they are on. The anti-imperialist camp firmly holds the justification of anti-fascism, liberation, and reunification, which the imperialist camp can never deny. The nuclear missile powers, superpowers of the anti-imperialist camp DPRK, China, and Russia are growing stronger. At the same time, they firmly unite with Iran and other axis of resistance countries, along with our world anti-imperialist movements. In contrast, the USA, European imperialism, and pro-US fascist countries are pushing World War III in full swing and manipulating the new Cold War framework as the internal overall crisis deepens. It is common sense that the side with both justification and strength wins the war. Awakened and united people of the world will bring an end to imperialism with vigorous anti-imperialist joint struggle and put forward a new era of global independence and peace. Disband NATO, the plotting alliance for World War. 1. The NATO Summit is underway in Washington, D.C. from today to July 11th. One of key agenda items has been the Ukraine war, which has been under discussion for 3 consecutive years since 2022. NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg granted that our most urgent task at the summit will be support to Ukraine, and to agree for NATO to lead the coordination and provision of security assistance and training for Ukraine. Specifically, it is expected that the long-term Ukraine aid plan will be announced during this meeting. The main components of the plan include deploying a representative to Kiev, establishing a new command in Germany, and deploying approximately 700 troops from 32 NATO member countries. These troops will take part in the NATO security assistance and training for Ukraine operation, and are expected to take over most of the missions that the U.S. has undertaken since 2022. The U.S. and NATO's strategy towards Russia, namely prolonging the Ukraine war to exhaust Russia and expand the front across Eastern Europe, is becoming increasingly evident. 2. In this summit, the aggressive maneuvers towards Russia, China, and the DPRK are expected to be intensified even further. Even though the war in Ukraine is obviously a conflict in the European region, Stoltenberg openly revealed the evil plan to expand NATO's scope globally. He started that the most important suppliers and supporters of war in Ukraine are countries in Asia, and emphasized that security is not regional but global. In particular, he cunningly accused anti-imperialist states such as the DPRK, China, and Iran, along with other Asian countries, of China inciting the largest military conflict in Europe since World War II, and that Russia is increasingly forming closer ties with Iran and DPRK. As already deploying NATO troops all over Latin America and completing the South Atlanticization of NATO, NATO is mobilizing Israel and pro-US Arab countries and is trying to manipulate the West Asia version of NATO by targeting anti-Zionist, anti-imperialist armed struggle forces such as Iran. At the same time, it is intensifying its efforts in pacification of NATO, targeting the DPRK in China at this time. 3. Biden, Kishida, and Yoon Suk-yeol practically formed the Asian version of NATO through the Camp David meeting last August. In the meeting documents, it is stated that if conflict is created against any one of these 3 countries, they shall work together to coordinate response actions in an expeditious manner. This is no different from the collective defense principle of NATO. Moreover, the 3 parties agreed on the regularization of multi-domain joint military exercises, such as NATO's annual joint military exercise conducted across land, sea, air, and cyber domains. Following the operation of a real DPRK missile data sharing system by the US, Japan, and the ROK at the end of 2023, they proceeded to conduct Freedom Edge, a multi-domain military exercise, and also the military exercise of the Asian version of NATO, agreed upon at the Camp David meeting. In July this year. Through these actions, they widely publicized that the trilateral military bloc among the US, Japan, and the ROK, driven by the US, had been fully established, and the formation of the Asia version of NATO was complete. 4. NATO's pacificization is advancing very dangerously in conjunction with the Asia version of NATO. NATO is pushing to operate a liaison office in Japan, and is planning to discuss military secrets, sharing the cyber security cooperation with the RK separately at this time. At the NATO summit, Kishida is leading the IP4 summit focused on anti-DPRK and anti-China agendas, while Ukrainian fascist Zelensky is demanding a meeting with IP4 countries to deepen their involvement in the Ukraine war. Meanwhile, the RK government under the pretext of the Treaty of Comprehensive Strategic Partnership between the DPRK and Russia, has complete legal reviews on the direct deployment of RK-made weapons to destruction in the Ukraine war. It appears Yoon Suk-yeol will formalize this at the NATO summit. This series of facts demonstrates that NATO's pacification is proceeding very rapidly. Yoon Suk-yeol's visit to the U.S. for war clearly shows that the NATO summit is a meeting for plotting wars in East Asia. Yoon Suk-yeol will attend the NATO summit on July 10th after visiting the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command located in Honolulu, Hawaii. At the meeting with the new commander of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, Paparo, he begged for him to help build an integrated form of extended deterrence between the ROK and the U.S. And Paparo recklessly remarked, maintain a firm combined defense posture, extended deterrence is policy to transform the Korean Peninsula into a battlefield. The fact that the strategic asset class weapon system of the U.S. was developed 6 times on the Korean Peninsula for 2 months from April to June indicates that the U.S. aggressor forces and Yoon Suk-yeol's pro-U.S. warmongering gangs are fiercely maneuvering the ROK war. Against the backdrop of the pacification of NATO now underway, what does Yoon Suk-yeol's attendance at the NATO summit following his visit to the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, a key hub of the U.S. aggressive military forces? Yoon Suk-yeol, the puppet for war, is rampaging to launch the ROK war and East Asian war as intended by the U.S. aggressive forces. 6. The RIMPAC, the multinational joint military exercise, is being implemented on the Pacific Rim until August 2nd, including the term of the NATO summit. Regarding the exercise, of which among 29 participating countries, even 9 countries are NATO member countries. The commander of Carrier Strike Group First, Michael Rose, thoughtlessly stated that NATO countries gathering in one place for training means that the world is interconnected. NATO's war planning meetings are summits, and their war training grounds are RIMPAC. The reason why NATO is holding the meeting to plot the war at the same time is carrying out the large-scale multinational aggressive war exercise against DPRK, China, and Russia is to spread the flames of World War III from Eastern Europe through Western Asia, Middle East to East Asia. The fact that the Ukraine war intensified into full-scale war in February 2022 was mainly caused by NATO's eastward expansion indicates that the completion of pacification of NATO and Asia version of NATO provokes war in East Asia, alongside the progressive war exercises. Along with NATO, the imperialist aggressive war machine exists. World humanity cannot escape wars and massacres caused by imperialism. The anti-imperialist forces and the people of the whole world who remembered the victory of the World Anti-Fascist Front during World War II will surely lead World War III, which is being waged against imperialism, into victory. The day when independence and peace are realized worldwide is not far off. July 9th, 2024, in front of the White House, Washington, D.C.
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Free, free Palestine! Paris to Washington DC to oppose the NATO summit, to disband NATO, to stop the imperialist war, and to show that we the people in the worldwide are now united and has already stepped it up to the decisive battle against the aggressors. New axes of aggressors are not the PRK, Russia, China, and Iran. The real axis of aggressors are NATO, led by the US imperialism. We all know how many people did NATO kill in human history. NATO was formed here in Washington DC in 1949, just 4 years after Second World War. 1 year after, in 1950, 5 million Korean people were killed in Korean War. The Korean War was the first war that NATO involved. The US imperialism invaded Korea with its 50 allies. Not only the Korean people, but we remember the people in Bosnia in 1995 and the people in Kosovo in 1999. NATO dropped over 10,000 bombs on Yugoslavia, surpassing the destructive power of Hiroshima atomic bomb. And we all know how many countries, democracies, NATO has destroyed. We remember the Arab Springs made our government become the puppets of US imperialism. We remember the Libya's leader who opposed the Spring was brutally killed by the US imperialism. NATO did 7,500 airstrikes and killed almost 5,000 Libyan people. Color revolutions is not for democracy, but for making puppets for imperialism. The essence of NATO is imperialist war machine, and the US imperialism is the core. The war in Ukraine is not the result of Russian aggressions, but of the US-led NATO's imperialist drive to war. The US and its allies financed, armed, and organized a fascist coup in Kiev in 2014. Everyone knows that NATO and its imperialist masters will never stop waging war. Today's NATO summit is the meeting to plot the war. NATO's meeting for playing the war. In the summit and the training ground is RIMPAC. NATO is trying to spread the flames of World War III from Eastern Europe through West Asia to East Asia. The Ukraine war, caused by NATO's eastward expansions, indicates that the completion of Asian version of NATO will provoke war in East Asia. As long as NATO, the imperialist aggressive war machines exist, where humanity cannot escape war and massacres. The only way to stop them is through the struggle of the people. The people who remember the victory of World Anti-Fascist Front during the Second World War will never be defeated, and will surely disband imperialist war machine NATO and bring an end to imperialism. Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
From the river to the sea!
Palestine will be free!
From the river to the sea!
Palestine will be free!
Stop RIMPAC exercise!
Stop, stop, stop!
Stop RIMPAC exercise!
Stop, stop, stop!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Stop RIMPAC exercise!
Stop, stop, stop!
Stop RIMPAC exercise!
Stop, stop, stop!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Stop RIMPAC exercise!
Stop, stop, stop!
Stop RIMPAC exercise!
Stop, stop, stop!
Stop RIMPAC exercise!
Stop, Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Free Palestine!
Stop RIMPAC Exercise!
Stop!
Stop RIMPAC Exercise!
Stop!
US imperialism and NATO cannot avoid defeat in World War III. The move to form an Asian version of NATO is perilous, as it could be a decisive step towards war in East Asia, where military tensions are already rising sharply. Russia's special military operation in 2022 was launched in response to the Maidan coup in 2014, and the subsequent 8-year massacres in Donbass, as well as Ukraine's push to join NATO. President of the Republic of Korea, Yoon Suk-yeol, and Prime Minister of Japan, Fumio Kishida, are attending 3 consecutive NATO summits in Madrid in 2022, Vilnius in 2023, and Washington in 2024. This shows the imperialist camp's new strategy to conquer the world in order to realize the Indo-Pacificization of NATO, to form an Asian version of NATO by promoting the AUKUS and Quad groupings. It confirms the essence of the Obama administration pivot to Asia policy and the Biden administration's Indo-Pacific strategy. This also shows that the imperialist camp has established and is carrying out the new hegemonic strategy, according to which it strengthens and expands NATO to use it as a tool for dominating the world. Since Russia and China have resolutely opposed the dictate and hegemony policies of the US and imperialist camps in the UN Security Council, such as the sanctions against the DPRK, it reflects imperialism's weakness, not its strength. The imperialist camp has long been planning for the new Cold War structure, and the fundamental way to realize it is with the ongoing World War III. While the Cold War began after World War II, when the socialist camp expanded globally and the imperialist camp, fearing this, declared Trumanism and implemented the Marshall Policy, the new Cold War began with World War III and will enter full swing after the end of World War III. The Cold War and the new Cold War are all confrontational wars between anti-imperialists and imperialist camps. However, the difference is that the leading and auxiliary forces in the former are the socialist and national liberation forces, respectively, while in the latter, the socialist DPRK and China and the former socialist Russia are leading forces, and the other world anti-imperialist forces, including the axis of resistance like Iran, are auxiliary forces. Also in the Cold War, the imperialist camp locally waged hot wars against small socialist or national liberation countries, while in the new Cold War, the imperialist camp is trying to wage a hot wars against socialist or former socialist powerful countries. However, for fear of mutual assured destruction, MAD, strictly use proxy warfare. The most important feature of the new Cold War is that the DPRK, the most steadfast socialist country, has joined the ranks of the nuclear and missile superpowers, occupying a key position and playing an important role in the anti-imperialist camp. It is also important that China and Russia, which have traditionally had bad relations, are united in the anti-imperialist camp. It is also noteworthy that the axis of resistance, including Iran, has joined the anti-imperialist camp with 2 billion Muslims. With these features in the forces, plus the noble cause of the anti-fascism, liberation and reunification, the anti-imperialist camp is overwhelming the imperialist camp. The imperialist camp's war provocative strategies, threatening with expeditionary proxy, and mixed wars are also out of their element owing to the anti-imperialist camp's strategy and tactics of the not getting involved in war as much as possible, to build up its pretext for war but not to confront it fiercely, directly, and all at once the war breaks out. It is no coincidence that NATO and the other imperialist forces are being pushed back in Ukraine and the Zionism is being cornered in West Asia, Middle East. The current world situation can be summarized in one sentence. The flames of World War III, instigated by imperialism, are spreading from Eastern Europe to West Asia, traveling to Eastern Asia. The war in Ukraine began with the Maidan coup d'etat in 2014, intensified with the 8-year civil war in Donbass, and entered full swing with Russia's special military operation in 2022. The war in Ukraine is an anti-imperialist, anti-fascist war in which Russia fights against NATO imperialism and Zelensky's fascist forces. A liberation war to liberate the Ukrainian people, including ethnic Russians, and a preventive war to prevent an invasion of Russia, which is the final objective of NATO's eastward policy. The root of war in West Asia is the emergence of Zionist Israel in 1948. As a response to its blatant provocations, this war began with Palestine. As a response to its blatant provocations, this war began with the Palestine Al-Aqsa Flood operation in 2023, intensified with the joining of Hezbollah and Ansar Allah Houthi forces, and entered full swing with Iran's Operation True Promise in 2024. The war in West Asia is an anti-imperialist, anti-Zionist war against imperialism and Zionism, and a liberation war to liberate the Palestinian people. It is true that the war in Ukraine influenced the outbreak of war in West Asia, and the war in Ukraine and the war in West Asia are triggering the outbreak of war in East Asia. The war in Taiwan, one of the two pillars of the war in East Asia, is an anti-imperialist war in which China and Taiwanese people confront imperialism, a national liberation war to liberate Taiwan, which is one nation with China, and a national reunification war in which China and Taiwan, which are the same nation, become one. The other pillar, the war in the ROK, is the anti-fascist and anti-imperialist war to liquidate the fascist and pro-US Japanese factions in the ROK and to drive out US imperialism. A war of subjugation declared by the DPRK at its Supreme People's Assembly in January, and an internal war to eliminate a group of outsiders, top-class stooges in the one-nation state. However, as a war intended and provoked by the imperialist camp in East Asia is being delayed by the strategic patience of the DPRK and China. The imperialist camp, impatient with the approach of November US presidential election, is moving toward promoting and expanding the already ongoing wars in Ukraine and West Asia. This trend has been particularly evident as the preparatory meeting are held in the run-up to the July NATO Summit in Washington, with the Russian advance in Ukraine to Kharkov and the defeat of the warmongers of Western Europe in the European Parliament. As NATO has threatened Russia with the mobilization of its nuclear aircraft carrier groups and tactical nuclear exercises in the Arctic, Baltic, and Mediterranean, Russia has responded with military exercises to strengthen unity with its allies. Since the USA and NATO seek to encircle Russia and China by expanding their reach beyond the Atlantic to Pacific, Russia has responded with the new alliance strategy encompassing Eurasia alongside China. This is why, After the victory to the DPRK, this is why after the victory in the March election, Putin first visited China, Belarus, Uzbekistan, and then the DPRK and Vietnam. Among them, his visit to the DPRK to sign the Treaty of Comprehensive Strategic Partnership between the DPRK and Russia on June 19th was so important that it became a global issue for a while. This treaty, signed on June 19th, established the strongest alliance ever between the DPRK and Russia, including the former Soviet Union. Even the US treaties with the RK and Japan are not stronger than this treaty, nor are those between NATO members. Article 4 of this DPRK-Russia treaty on June 19th, which stipulates in case any one of the two sides is put in a state of war by an armed invasion from an individual state or several states, the other side shall provide military and other assistance with all means in the possession without delay. It is almost identical to Article 1 of the Treaty of Friendship, Cooperation and Mutual Assistance between the DPRK and Soviet Union, signed on July 6, 1961. But the former additionally includes Article 3. In case a direct threat of armed invasion is created, the two sides shall immediately operate the channel of bilateral negotiations. When we see the US treaties with these allies, the RK and Japan, the Mutual Defense Treaty between the Republic of Korea and the United States of October 1st, (1953) only states that in the event of an armed attack, the parties will consult together. In Article 2 and Article 4 of the same treaty states, the Republic of Korea grants and the United States of America accepts the right to dispose United States land, air, and sea forces in and about the territory of Republic of Korea. The Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Security between the United States and Japan on June 23rd, 1960, only stipulates in Article 4 that the parties will consult together, and in Article 5, in the event of an armed attack, act to meet the common danger. Both are feeble in alliance compared to the DPRK-Russia Treaty on June 19th. Article 4 of the treaty between the RK and the US of October 1st, 1953 is a shameful clause between imperialist and colony that leaves all decision to the USA. The 2024 DPRK-Russia treaty has a different background than the 1961 DPRK-Soviet Union treaty. The latter has concluded just before the Caribbean crisis in 1962, and the former was just before the war in East Asia. But the war in Ukraine has already been going on for more than 2 years, and the war in West Asia is underway. In addition, Russia, a capitalist country, is heading the same way as the Soviet Union, a socialist state and the guiding and leading force in the world anti-fascist war in World War II. The DPRK had experience defending itself in the war in 1950 to 1953, in which it fought against 60 allied countries, including the most powerful imperialists of the time, the USA. However, unlike them, the DPRK is now a nuclear and missile superpower with nuclear warheads and delivery systems. In other words, the treaty and Russia and the DPRK as nuclear and missile superpowers signed during the facing the war respectively is the strongest in history and stronger than any of the imperialist alliance treaties. The DPRK is preparing for an imminent war in the RK by reaffirming the 1961 treaty with China when Chinese President Xi Jinping visited the DPRK in 2019, and by further strengthening the 1961 treaty with the Soviet Union via the treaty with Russia on June 19th, 2024. This shows that the DPRK is roughly adhering to the strategic task of strengthening unity with international revolutionary forces, one of the three revolutionary capabilities for the reunification of 1964, and preparing a favorable international environment for reunification, one of the 5 policies for reunification declared in May 1960. Invasion and plunder are core characteristics of imperialism. Imperialism is the main culprit and root of all the wars that have been fought over the centuries and beyond. We must not be fooled by all the cunning maneuvers that imperialism wages to deflect political and economic crisis, and to shift the blame for its wars onto the anti-imperialist camp, all for its own insatiable greed. Both Trump and Biden are merely political agents of the United States monopoly capital, the head of contemporary imperialism. We recognize that both of their ways represent imperialist policies, just different methods of ruling. However, we note that Trump has said for any reason that if he comes to power, he will withdraw from the war in Ukraine, hold talks with the DPRK chairman Kim Jong-un, and even consider removing U.S. troops from Korea. We also note that Biden's seemingly milder de-risking policy compared to Trump's decoupling of the USA and China, which is limited to the economic sector, is actually a decisive measure for the separation of Taiwan, which could bring about a war between China and Taiwan, leading to the war in the ROK. Therefore, we must keep a close eye on the imperialist camp's belligerent rhetoric and war provocations, which are becoming more frequent and intense in the context of November U.S. presidential election, where Trump is likely to be elected, and the emergence of the Democrats' nominee replacement claim after the recent televised debate between Trump and Biden. In order to avoid World War III in earnest, the war in East Asia is necessary, and it is inevitable that it will occur in some way, whether directly caused by waging war in the ROK and the war in Taiwan in East Asia, or indirectly promoted through expansion of war in Eastern Europe and escalation of the war in West Asia. We certainly do not want war, and we will make every effort to prevent it. But if war breaks out inevitably, we cannot miss the strategic importance of channeling the momentum of this war into a revolution. In this sense, facing World War III, we should refer to both the experience of World War II, which was an anti-fascist war in terms of anti-imperialist war, and the experience of World War I, which turned the war into a decisive stage of revolution. Imperialism won the Cold War, but it will lose the new Cold War due to its inherent vulnerability. The overwhelming forces, justifiable pretext, and operational superiority of the anti-imperialist camp are potent guarantees for advancing the victory. In World War III, US imperialism and NATO cannot avoid defeat. The final victory of the anti-imperialist camp is certain. We will chant the slogan. Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Disband NATO!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
From the river to the sea!
Palestine, live it free!
From the river to the sea!
Palestine, live it free!
Stop RIMPAC exercise!
Stop, stop, stop!
Stop RIMPAC exercise!
Stop, stop, stop!
The people united!
We'll never be defeated!
The people united!
We'll never be defeated!